Hello, my name is Aaron Medema, and here with me is Ryan Horton, and we are data visualization developers at National Heritage Academies. NHA is a charter school management company. We're based out of Grand Rapids, Michigan, but we have 76 schools in 9 states right now. And we're going to be talking about the Tableau JavaScript API today. And we have recently created a project which is a web portal for our school leaders. And our schools, they not only have a principal, but they also have typically 3 or 4 deans, and each dean covers a wing of like kindergarten through 2nd grade, 3rd through 5th, 6th through 8th. And we created a site where they could go in and see a lot of information all centralized. And we used the JavaScript API to do that. And the reason that was really helpful for us is because even though Tableau is our primary tool for reporting and dashboards now, we still have quite a few Microsoft Reporting Services reports, some custom web tools, even some Excel reports, and just sometimes reference documents. And our principals and deans would have to have all these different bookmarks to all these different sites and know which this report is on this site and this report is on this site. And it was just difficult for them to manage. As you can imagine, they have a lot going on in the course of a school day, and when they need information, they don't want to hunt and peck for it. So we were originally planning on just doing one web page that had links to all the different reports that went out to Tableau if necessary, or our report manager if necessary. But once the Tableau API came out, we realized that we could really take that to the next level where we wanted to and actually embed all of the reports rather than just having them as links. So what that's allowed us to do is our end users don't need to know where they're going. They don't need to know what tool the report was created in. They just need to go and get the information. It's a consistent look and feel. We also have our security is managed centrally through our website here. So even though Tableau has a pretty robust security model, we are not necessarily using that here, so we don't have to manage security in Tableau, we don't have to manage it in reporting services, we don't have to manage it in all these different places. And also, another great thing about this is that we can have filters outside of the visualization, and those filters can be controlled by who the login user is. And so sometimes we use that so we can do default values for filters, but we can also have that so that some users may not need a filter and others may need that filter, and we can control their ability to do that filtering based on their user ID as well. And it allows us to do some dynamic filters. So if we always want to show the most recent academic year, that's something that is pretty easy to do using an external filter, but it's not always the easiest thing when the filter is within the page. So I'm going to quick take you through one of our visualizations, which you can see up on our screen right now, how it works in the finished product, and then Ryan is going to take you through how that view is actually built. So what you're seeing on our screen right now is our School Leadership Experience homepage. There are a few different menus across the top covering different areas of academics, attendance, behavior, enrollment, and our teacher observation protocol, or TOP. We're going to focus primarily on the academics, and this is our academic homepage right now. There are a couple Tableau views up here at the top. We've got some filters outside. We have some filters inside. And then there are a couple views here that I'm not going to get into a whole lot. I want to spend most of the time on this view down at the bottom. This is a student distribution view. So our students all take NWEA testing, which is taken in the fall, winter, and spring, and that's a benchmark of their learning progress that we use. It's a national test, and so we can compare that across all of our schools. And so this view shows some general information for each grade level, and there are some general grade level stats, but then there's also a distribution of students, and this is on a college readiness spectrum. So whether we think they're a very low probability of being college ready all the way up to very high probability of being college ready. And we also can change the color coding on that. So this right here is actually a parameter that we're passing in through the API to the Tableau visualization to change the color. And I apologize if this is running a little bit slow. This is on our development server because we had to scramble our data so we wouldn't be showing student names. So we had to do that on our development server rather than our production server. But you can see there that just changed the parameter changed the color from a status measure to a growth measure. And now if I change that back to the status measure, we can also do some drill down on this. So it shows us, when it comes back up, it shows the continuous spectrum, but then there's a block for each student. And so we can hover over these students and see their details. If we click on it and select, and then we've got a tooltip that will show some of that information, but we also are going to show student history. And so this is an action within the Tableau website, or the Tableau dashboard, and hopefully this won't take too long to load. It's pretty snappy on our production server. But what this is going to bring up is show not just this most recent period, but also that student's entire testing history of NWA through the fall, winter, and spring sessions, so that we can see not only where they are for their college readiness path probability at this point, but are they getting closer to their threshold, moving further away from it. Looks like it's spinning for us, but should come through hopefully soon. And we've had a lot of really great feedback from our principals and deans about this view, being able to see a high-level summary of each grade, but then being able to actually drill into each student as well. Oh, there we go. So there's the view that shows the student's history, and this is a combination dual-axis chart with a Gantt bar and then also a trend line. So we can see this student has been, especially in math, they started out about a medium to low, and they become even more solid in the very high throughout their time at the school. Now, this view is really helpful, but that's only if you know where the student you're looking for is on the spectrum. So one API feature that we've used is we put in a student search here. And this was actually when we first demoed this to our principals and deans, we held a competition for them for this whole website to come up with an idea for enhancements. And we offered a gift card for the winner, and the winner was for the student search concept. So what this is an element here where I can go in and search for a student, and as I'm typing in, it's filtering down. We're showing student images if we have them. So then this was a student that we were looking at before, but now when I select that student, some things are going to happen. We're doing not only the highlight of that student, but it's also going to filter down to that student's grade and show the history. And all that is being passed in through the API. So you can see here that student's in 8th grade, so it filtered down to just that student's grades, so we didn't have to do any scrolling. It highlighted that student where they are in the spectrum so that you can see how they compare to their classmates. And it also passed down to show the details like we did before. And that's using a variety of different features within the API to make that happen. And again, we've had some great results with principals and deans using this to be able to drill in and find information about a specific student. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan to show how all this magic actually happens.
So my name is Ryan Horton. I'm also a data visualization developer here at NHA. My main primary goal with it is the web development side of it, because there are some visits that we do that are just HTML based, but we use a lot of Tableau, and we wanted to be able to bring that Tableau to everybody without having to send them to Tableau server's website and everything like any other website that we might have, like Aaron explained earlier. So with Tableau Server 8 came out, also did the JavaScript API. And I've been here about a year now, and one of my first jobs was actually getting the API to work. So I've been using it since Beta 1. I mean, it was Christmas Day when Beta 1 came out, and I was opening it up. So what I've done is I've taken the same website that Aaron was just showing you, and I've stripped it down just to that one view. And I'm going to break it down in here 5 steps of how we actually use the API to get it in there. So step 1 is preparation. It's just a couple things that we had to do to get Tableau Server to do what we wanted it to do so that it would work on the website correctly. Step 2 is just learning the API and embedding, and this is kind of the beginner step where I'm going to kind of brush over that quickly because a lot of that stuff is documented very well on Tableau's website, and again, that's a beginner kind of element to the whole thing. Step 3 is where we kind of take it to the next level. We're going to add some filters and use some of the basic API features. Step 4, we're going to go into some advanced features, and then 5, I'll show you the finished product once again. So we go ahead and jump in here, step 1. First of all, I just want to say, by no means am I a JavaScript expert, the API expert, or anything like that. We kind of baby stepped through this as the betas came out and tweaked our code during each beta. So this was our solution. It's not probably necessarily the way any other company might do it. They might have different needs, different wants, but this is how it works for us. So don't think that this is exactly how it has to be done. This is just how we got it to work for us. So that being said, one of the first things you want to do that works the best for us is you want to go ahead and set up the tickets and adding trusted IPs for Tableau Server. What this does is when you embed things onto the web page, if you don't have a ticket system going in that's built into Tableau, every time a viz loads onto a website, if the user is not authenticated with Active Directory or within the Windows, username and password box is going to pop up. And we have a lot of users that use our site on an iPad, which thankfully Tableau runs great on an iPad, but when the viz first pops up, they had to type in their username and password. So not only were they logging into the website, but they were logging into the Tableau server as well. So if you set up tickets like this with if you disable automatic logon right here, surrounded in the yellow, and then go ahead and go to the command prompt, and this command right here, tab admin, set the trusted host. What you're going to want to do is set a trusted host, tell Tableau Server that these IP addresses are allowed to come in and look at the vizzes. So what you're going to do is add on here is anything that your web server IP. So if you have multiple servers, you're going to have to add every single one individually, and you can do that in this line with comma delimited, as you can see right here. And just a fair warning, learn from one of our mistakes. Be sure to add all your development machines, because when you try to debug on your own computer and nothing loads, it's because your IP of your development machine was not trusted as well. So then after you do that stuff, you just simply reset Tableau Server and you're ready to start building code as you go. So now, next thing you want to do is publish your workbook to the server and you're ready to go. So kind of the pros and cons of this. Pros is it eliminates the dual login, and if for some reason you had a new employee and they weren't added into the Active Directory work group that you had set up, they're not going to get any content when they log in because they're not in the user group. Using the ticket system, it doesn't care who you are as long as it's coming from a trusted computer, and that it bypasses that. And then a lot of times we kind of reused worksheets between pages, and if you go from page to page, it kind of remembers what you did to that viz when you transfer from page to page. So it keeps it in that state, even though you didn't filter it down like you did on the previous page. But what the ticket does is it gets the default view from the server, so there's no longer any cached workbook state. And then in order for this to work and be safe on our Tableau server, we had to create a second site. So we have our one site on Tableau server that people go to use, and then we also have another one that we just host our API dashboards in. And in order for that to be secure on the web server, we had to add a parameter to it. We're calling a show hide parameter. It's just a 1, 0 value. If it's 1, go ahead and show the viz. If it's 2, don't show any data. And the API knows to pass this every time that it loads a viz. So it works on websites, but if you go directly to it on the server, it doesn't. But you don't have to do that if you use tickets, because we can secure the folder on the server so that no one can go into it, but the API can still hop right onto it. The only downfall that we've seen on this, and mind you, this is only on our development right now. In production, it's still not using tickets, but our development server is using tickets. But the only con that we have seen so far is when people go to the actual Tableau server page, they have to type in the username and password. Everything else has been a benefit.
But even on that way, they can still hit the checkbox to remember me, and
yep.
That's only for the first time.
So if we go into this next step here, we set up server to accept tickets. This part is really kind of beginner for the API. It's real simple to use. I'm just going to go over it real quickly. This stuff is very well documented on Tableau's website. They have a step-by-step guide, just kind of where I got the inspiration for building this website. So the first thing you want to do is just reference the library tied to your server. So it's just your server name and then the rest of the path to the API library. The next thing you got to do is just start writing some JavaScript. That's all you got to do. So this is the main chunk of code to use to initially get a viz onto a page. So you say what element on the page is holding it, and then the next thing you want to do is pass the URL to that dashboard. And then you can set some options here. These first four are pretty standard. High tabs and high toolbar. We want to set those to true because when we bring the viz into a web page, we don't want it to necessarily look like server. We want it to blend into the web page like Aaron showed before. No commands, just the viz. The next thing you do here is set the height and width. That's whatever you want it to be. It'll render on the page as so. I'm going to skip these other three and show this last one here real quick. This is on first interactive. This was a pretty important part to the API letting us do what we wanted to do, as well as what I'm going to talk next. But this is what you do once the viz has stopped rendering. So once it's rendered on the page, you want to execute some more JavaScript, and I'll show you some examples of that. But in some cases like that, you might want to load a second viz, or after that, you might also want to attach a listener. Both of those things we do in our websites. In this example, I'll show you how to attach a listener, not necessarily load a second viz. But then these other three right here, this was a make or break, and I believe it was beta 6 when this came out. Now this is the ability to set filters and parameters on initialization. Before, we were loading the viz onto the page, stealing what the filters were from it, bringing them back down, and then passing them again. And there's two things wrong with that. A, it had to load twice, so it was a lot more wait time for the user. And B, it makes it less secure. So when the viz first rendered up and we wanted to get the filter names from it, everything was visible to whoever was looking at the page. And we have some views that deans are only allowed to see. We have some views that only principals are allowed to see, and not vice versa. So it ruined a kind of a security model there, and this really helped us get around that and really made this project a go. So I'm going to real quick show you what this code looks like in action. So again, I just filled in the rest of what we wanted. So that's the URL to ours. Here's our website show hi parameter, and then after it's done, I want it to tell us that it's been loaded. So if I go ahead and run this script, down here in that element that's called div holder ID, it's go ahead and it's going to start loading our viz. And once it's done, there should be a message box that shows up. So we're done here, and then here's our message box right here. The viz has loaded. So right out of the box, it's real simple to write that as your code. The only kind of downfall of that is it's a lot of code just to load one dashboard. You can see here in the cons. It's a couple lines, and if you have a page where on our first page at Aaron example, there was 3 different ones on there. So I got to write that 3 different times, whereas we can kind of streamline that. So the pros of this is using the first on interactive allows us to load them asynchronously. So meaning we can do one at a time. Once one's done, it'll start on the next one. And the other part that's awesome about it is this viz is actually 5 worksheets, but it's only one call to the server. So it's better off to put everything that you want into one dashboard, and it only makes one call to the server. Otherwise, this would be 5 different calls. And obviously, the pro is to be able to pass filters and parameters on initialization. And like things to note, I may have already mentioned this. This is using a second site created just for the API dashboards. That's where we manage those. And this is using tickets. So if you notice, there was no login prompt. The website show parameter wasn't exactly needed. I put it up there just to show it for you, but it was not needed in this. And I don't have to be in a proper security group Tableau server to work, and this is not cached. This is how it's been published to the server. So on all those things, we're good to go. But you saw what we've done before, and we kind of want to do a little bit more than that. So I want to create some reusable code around that. I don't want to type that out every time. So instead of me sitting here typing and making a whole bunch of typos and everybody laughing on the other end of the screen, I've already just kind of imported here what I've already built. So this is just an array that stores everything that's been rendered on the page as a viz, so it can store them into an array and execute multiple functions on every viz that's on the page. This initialize viz, if I'm in the test environment, go ahead and get a ticket number, which is this down here, which is just an AJAX call to our web server that posts to the Tableau server and gets the ticket number and brings it back down. So all that is just getting the ticket number. Now here's the main one that we kind of use to condense that code that we showed in the last example. First of all, I'm setting defaults for everything, And now the center true is not part of the API. It's part of what you saw on the first page where it had text that said loading viz, and it had its own little loader there. I did that just to kind of make it a little bit more clean, and I can control when it disappears and the viz is ready for people to use. And that's just asking if I want to center that on the page or not. So this is just setting up that holding div, so it's nothing really with the API. And then here, it's just a couple functions to build our server name, our server URL, excuse me. So if we're on test, go to our test server. If we're not, go to our production server. And those names are not actually our server names, so don't anybody try anything funny. If we want to go down here now, we can see, okay, again, if we're on test, build the URL as if we're using tickets. So we have our server on there that says do not use, and that's where the ones that use the tickets, and actually that's where we host our API dashboards. And you can see here the difference is it says it's trusted and it passes the ticket number. Here, it doesn't. And now we go in here and it says, all right, set up the options based on the defaults if nothing was passed in. And now the other thing that Aaron showed you was there was filters and parameters already built on the screen. So those are stored in their own array, and we can come in here, and the Tableau server knows to look for that array and pass those options. So this is just, it's looping through each filter, and as you can see, I'm using jQuery to make this a little bit simpler. But it's passing through our filters array, and it's just adding to our options the name, and then here it pulls the value. And it's doing the same thing for the parameters. It acts the exact same way with filters and parameters when you do it on initialization, which is actually a really cool thing to do. And then also on the example Aaron showed you, some of the visitors don't use filters that the other ones used. So we can also add the option to say ignore this filter or remove it, and it'll take that away from the option so that doesn't get passed to the server. And then all it does here is push it back out to the web page that made the call. So I've basically just built a library around the API for me to reuse and just kind of use a couple lines of code instead of writing it every single time. And these advanced functions down here we can get into later in the presentation because I have those broken out. So now we can see how it looks with a lot less code. So now it's only about 4 lines here, and if I didn't want to do anything after the viz was rendered, these 3 would be cut out. So I'm really just passing the name. So if we go ahead and run this, you can see it's going to act exactly the same. And now there's that holding div that I'm talking about, and it's centered in within the div, which is that center parameter. If not, if I set that to false, it would show up here at the top so the user could see it. Now behind the scenes, the actual Tableau loader is happening, but then once it's done, that goes away and it's just ready to be used. So now this code for the pros on this is the code can be reused throughout my application or applications, and I don't have to reuse it. I can just copy that library, put it in a NuGet package, and bring it across any website that I'm building. The cons, it's still not handling filters and parameters on the web page. The JavaScript built around the Tableau API is, but I'm not doing that on the page. So let's go ahead and jump into the more advanced things, which is adding filters and some more of the basic API. So now you saw on the thing Aaron showed you that we are adding cascading filters, which is similar to only relevant values within Tableau. So you might be asking why I use filters outside of Tableau when Tableau does it by itself so nicely. Well, there's actually a lot of reasons for that. It's kind of a loaded question. And Aaron touched on a lot of that at the beginning. I mean, we use other technologies in Tableau, I know. But security is managed in one place. As you can see up here at the top, it knows that it's me on this website. So anytime it asks for anything from the server, my username is being passed, and our data behind the scenes is all filtered by that. So the security is managed by username. You can do it in Tableau, but in this case, we can do it in the front end and pass it down to all of our technologies. Again, certain filters might only be needed for users, so it wouldn't come back if I was a different user. Consistent look and feel on all pages because different technologies have different looking filters. If we do it on the web page, it all looks the same. We can set the default values, have multiple filters, which is nice on the page because once one is uploaded, then it reinitializes the viz instead of using the change filter command, because if you keep it on the change filter command, each one you change makes a call to the server and you have to sit and wait for each one. And the way we do it is just sitting there.
Especially with some of our more complicated views, we really don't want it to reload after every filter is picked.
And number 7, the API supports it. So let's go ahead and take advantage of that. And like we said before, the student search that Aaron showed you is using all those filters at top to narrow down what students it searches for. So it was not asking the API what school is being picked. It already knows because it's on the website. So how did we accomplish this? Well, that was actually quite difficult. We had many long meetings of how we're going to do it. And we just wanted to point out a few mistakes that we made to kind of help you guys along the way if you guys are trying to do this. So Well, you can pull the filter and parameter values from the viz. It's got to load twice. So you got to load it once, pull everything, put it in the web page, and then send it back, which is a lot of waiting time for the user. And again, it shows the security. Data types. The one issue we ran in with data types is Tableau asks for date time format in a different format than normal. So I have that in the code. That's in there. Just watch out for that. Data types are kind of tricky because they're actually being passed in a URL, so they have to be URL friendly. Filter and parameter names are not always what you name them in Tableau. Sometimes parameters get parameter appended onto the end of it, and there's a lot of trial and error there to kind of find out which one it's actually asking for. A lot of everything is case sensitive, as you know JavaScript is in the first place. Certain things look for spaces and some things don't look for spaces. Mainly when you're getting viz, those don't want spaces, but sometimes filters and parameter names, I believe, do want the spaces in there. It's a little tricky to kind of keep track of that. And when if you decide to do the cascading filters route like we're about to show you, use a master data source with all the already common relations built. So it's just asking that by passing parameters in, and it gets the values back out. And this is a kind of a big one. We are scratching our heads for a while over this one. Always use numeric values whenever possible. We had one viz that we were passing last name, first name into, and it's delimited by a comma right there. Well, that's also the delimiter that Tableau is looking for. So that means we were passing in last name, first name as a separate, as opposed to being one name. So we switched that to using our IDs that we have tied in the back end, and everything started working perfectly. So let's go ahead and show you how we built the filters. So we have our filters array, like I mentioned before, sitting right here, and then we just do the same thing that we kind of did with the Tableau. We just built a nice little option array with properties, and we pass in what the ID of the filter we want, our web service function that's going to get it, so in this case we're calling our schools, what type of filter it is, if it allows multiple selections, and this parameters one is what's really kind of going to be different throughout every one. So we want to know what kind of value to hold on the back side of the drop-down list, and in this case we want it to be school number because that's what the Tableau viz is expecting to come in. And then the filter name within Tableau is school number. And with zero-based arrays in JavaScript, obviously this one, the order is going to be 0 because this is the first one in cascading. Then the second one, it's going to have a cascaded order of 1. Same thing with the filter name and the function and what you want to call it, but this one's a little different here because now we want to say cascade and filter this down based on the value picked in the school. So as you can see, as you build more filters, which I kind of just cut off at this one, we have some pages that go up to 7 filters, and the first one is always driving the one after it. So it's always relevant values. It's not everything in our database. So now when you run this, you just want to call your load page filters function and then the dashboard. So we can go ahead and look what that looks like. So I just ran that code above, and now we have our nice row of filters that we set up. The Canton is being pushed into this one, and that one's being pushed into the grades, so it knows, based on the filters before it, what's being there. So now some of the basic API the features that I don't think was on the view that Aaron showed. The reset button was, but I don't think these other two and these other two are used a lot with our principals and deans for this website. You can go ahead and clear the marks using the API. You can export it into a crosstab or a PDF, and then the one that Aaron used in the beginning, you can see he reloaded the viz from server, and that also repopulates the filters. A lot of times we experience that without having the tabs and the toolbar visible, sometimes users kind of get really deep into the filters on the Tableau viz, and they really just don't know how to get out of it. So that's what that reset button up there does. So in order to do clear selected marks, here's our array that all of our vizzes on the page are put into. And if there's only one on the page, it's still going to work the same. It's just only going to loop through this once with the jQuery each function. So to clear marks, it's actually a little bit different between dashboards and worksheets. Now we use a lot of dashboards. So it goes in and it gets the workbook. So we have our viz object that's in our array. Get the workbook for it, get the active sheet, and then this is the Tableau command, clear selected marks. And this is asynchronous, which I'll get into on the next step. But that just basically means you can do one thing at a time, kind of like the on first interactive. So this is what it handles for a dashboard, and it actually throws an error if you try to do that on a worksheet and it doesn't work. So that's why it's in this try catch block. So this will go through. Now it'll go through your viz because it knows it's a dashboard, get all the active sheets, get all the worksheets, and cycle through those and clear the marks on every sheet within that workbook. So that way you're still getting the same effect, but it's one function and it still works throughout. Exporting PDF is pretty much similar. I just created an exporter Tableau function, pass the name of the worksheet you want to export and the type. So in this case, the type's PDF. So we'll go ahead, again, cycle through each of our Tableau vizzes that's on the page. And this I'm just getting the Tableau name from the URL that's stored within the object. There's probably better ways to do this, but this was beta 3.4 kind of fix, and it just never got broken by update, so it's kind of stuck in there. So this is just getting the viz. It's the last thing that'll be in the URL, and if the name matches what I passed in, then here's the API command, show export PDF dialog, and the window pops up, and you can spit out the PDF. Otherwise, if it's not PDF, it knows it wants to be cross-tab, so it's the same thing here. Loop through, get the name, and show export cross-tab dialog. Same thing with PDF, it's just this time it's a cross-tab, which is basically CSV. So now the other thing that Aaron showed on the beginning with resetting. Now here you get your viz, you revert everything asynchronously, and then when it's done, so there's the async part, dispose of the viz and then remove that from our array. And then we have our function here that we called to begin with to reload all the viz, and everything just reloads back from server, back from scratch. Now, to put these on the page, I have a function within the filter library, which I don't need to get into. There's really nothing with the API. But this is calling API functions, the buttons, so I'll show you how to put those on the page. I've got my function, add menu buttons, and usually it'll pass a whole bunch of options in here. And in this case, I'm saying add the clear marks button. So within my buttons row in the table here, go ahead and append a button, and when it's clicked, call the function clear all marks that we mentioned at the top. So if I go ahead and run this code, now we got our buttons row, and we have our export to PDF here, clear selections, and we're using Bootstrap, if you can tell here, and we have the alert on this button to kind of show what that button does, and then the reset all button. So now that we know how to put all that stuff on the page, and then let's see it work with our dashboard. So right away we did our load filters, and then it went right to loading our buttons there with the save PDF clear selection, and now it's loading our viz. This is exactly the same thing Aaron showed in the front. It's a little tweak different to be more by grade, but the only thing missing here is that student search, which we'll get into. That's the cool part of this whole thing to show you. So it's the same viz as before. We have cascading filters, so now if I change this to one of our other schools, it knows that I changed one of those drop downs. It went and picked all the values of all those filters, and now it's passing it back to Tableau server to render that onto the page. So as we're loading, you can see the center on the holding div, and now it's loaded, and it should disappear. So now we're looking at a completely different school. Usually when it's just a principal or dean, that'll be just limited to their school, and they don't have to change that, but I'm a service center employee, so I have access to every school. So now we're using the pros to this. We're using a JavaScript library built around filters and the Tableau API instead of writing numerous lines of code every time. As you can see, all that there before, I just had to create the filters and pass the name of the Tableau viz, and it just knew what to do. There's been many instances where on this site, me and Aaron had to get together and add a new viz to be available, and it literally probably took only 10 to 15 minutes to get it up and running. It's a fantastic way to just put things on a website quickly once the actual libraries are built. So now the filter web service, like I said before, takes the username of the current user to filter the results. The multiple technologies, which we'll get into with the student search, that you've kind of already seen. And this actually can be data-driven for even less coding. We have a new project in line right now. It wasn't ready for this demonstration, but all those JavaScript objects and arrays that I was building is being pulled straight from a database. So I really just had to write the code to create those objects based on data-driven models coming from our MVC work, and it just works. There's even less coding to do that. And that's really the only con to this. There's a lot of initial coding to get this to work, but once it's done, and it can just be used throughout. So let's go jump into these advanced features here. And this is really where it starts to get cool and where we kind of had some fun. Now I know I just said that normally me and Aaron can take 10 to 15 minutes to put one in. This was not one of those cases. We really kind of had to get creative with this and really use the bellows of the API to get it to work. The whole reason being is when Aaron went into the tooltip and clicked the link at the bottom to say show student history, that's a link action within the tooltip. And you can't execute link actions throughout the API. At least I haven't found it, and I had a support ticket in, and They pretty much said that it didn't work either. So we got creative with it, and that's why this workbook has 5 worksheets on it. There's 4 of them are actually copies of each other, so it's a set of 2 and 2. And what this does is when you select the mark, it calls the first 2, but when you use the student search, it uses the other 2. So to get into that, what we want to do is we want to be able to select the mark from the web API. And the main reason here is, not to pick on Aaron, but I think you noticed when he was looking for his certain mark to show his demonstration before, he couldn't exactly find it real quick. So what we can do is set the search bar up, type the name in, and then tell the dashboard to pick that mark. And to do that, all you really have to do is get your sheet name here, and this is the Tableau function to go through and get that sheet so you can set it to a variable. And then, so on that variable, we want to select mark async. So what this does is the name here is going to be either a measure or dimension that you have on your workbook, and then you tell it, okay, wherever that measure or dimension has its value, select that mark. And then you can pass how you want it to be marked. And then the 3 that I've used is add, replace, and remove. Add just means, okay, select this mark as well as whatever is already selected. Replace says clear everything and select this. Remove is remove the one that I'm passing in. So we always want to use a replace on here because you want to filter it down to that one student. So let's go ahead and see how that works. As you can see, our filter is populated again with all of our buttons. Now this time we just have this load student search. And it's not ready yet, so it won't let me click in there. Our loading screen is still going here. So the nice thing about this is we had the room to put it on the page. On the front page, on the main academics page, we had kind of squeezed in, but here it actually fits in very nicely. So as you can see, we can go around in here and we can find a student if we knew what it is. But a lot of times you just want to know the student name and you just type it in. So we'll go ahead and start typing here, and as you can see, now we have our name scrambled, so obviously her name is not Marcel. But she's in grade 6, and if we click the name, so now we can go ahead and filter down to the student. So she's in grade 6, it's towards the bottom of this viz, and it's selecting the mark. So now it doesn't exactly look like it did what we wanted it to do. It kind of just grayed out everything. But if we scroll down here, you can see these 2 boxes in our grade 6 have been selected.
One thing that's really nice about this is that you can do a wildcard search as a filter in Tableau, but that actually filters it down. In this context, we want to be able to see how that student is placed within. So there isn't really a default way outside of the API that we found to do a highlight based on a wildcard search. So this helps achieve that.
Yeah, this was really a good solution to one of our problems here. And so as you can see, the selected mark that we have is all the way at the bottom. So we kind of want it to filter down so that it sees what mark they selected. So to do that, we can do some asynchronous commands. Again, like I said, we have 3 sheets that we're working with here. And we can see, so we set them to a variable. Now what we want to get out of this is, so it selected that mark, but it didn't bring up the student history at the bottom, like in the example when you click the action link. So what we want it to do, we want it to filter down to the grade, select the marks for that student, and then set our extra 2 sheets to be selected to that student so that they appear, because they have actions built on them that when there's a mark selected, it becomes visible. So what we do is we want to go ahead on that first one, just clear everything that's already on there, just in case something was going crazy, which is probably a little bit of overcoding, but that's kind of what I do sometimes. Next thing you want to do is apply the filter asynchronously to the grade, set it to whatever grade comes back with that student search, and replace it. Then once it sets that filter, we want to go ahead and select the marks on that sheet to be that student, and we're using a thing we call BKID. So that comes back through the student search, and we want to replace it with anything that's on there with that. After that's done, now we want to work with our other 2 sheets and do the same thing. We want to replace any selections on there and send them to there, to our current student that we pick. So if we want to go ahead and jump back into this, same thing is loading, so we're coming in here, and we already have a student in mind. So once this is done loading, we can go up into the student search, and what this should do now is filter down the grade, the student, and the student history should show up at the bottom. So now that we're loaded here in 2 seconds, there we go. If I start searching here, which I don't remember the name, but okay, so we got, I can't even pronounce that one, it's a fake name. So it's grade 7, so we can jump in here. So now it's going to filter it down, and this is a lot better than what we had before because now we'll have everything in context and on a nice clean view to see what we want to see. And this is kind of a prime example of why I put this holding screen on there to mask everything. Because there's a lot of things happening on the dashboard right now, and certain users might get a little confused of why everything just keeps changing. So as you can see, we're filtered down to 7th grade because that's what this student is in. Their 2 boxes are selected where they're at, and we have their student history. Now, when we did this, we thought we were ecstatic. We thought that we were done and this is exactly what we wanted, until we realized we got in there and started doing some beta testing. If someone comes in and clicks another mark and says, hey, show me the student history for this student, now we get this little conundrum. Now they're selected up top, but the history for the student that we searched for is down at the bottom, which is fine because we can go up here and say, hey, clear the student that we selected, and it'll stay selected on the other student, but it's still not exactly what we wanted. So in order to fix that, which we do, is we add an event listener to it. So if we add the event listener, now we can say in that function that says on first interactive, go ahead on that dashboard, add an event listener, and whenever a mark is selected, go ahead and run the function that says on mark selection. So in that function on mark selection, again, we can declare our sheets here, which in real world example, those are declared obviously at the top of my library, so I don't have to declare it in every function, but just to kind of show what's going on here, I've included it in here. So now this one is actually only 3 functions. So anytime a mark is selected, go ahead and on that main sheet, remove the last student ID that we picked. Then on that second and third sheet, remove those filters, and then on our main one, go ahead and bring it back down to every grade. So now we have our finished product here, which is a little bit similar to what Aaron showed. It's got a little bit different. This one's more broken down by grade, not subject. So we can go ahead and let this load here, and again, we have all this real estate. It's nice and clean. It looks good. It's user friendly, and it does exactly what we want to do. And it's a lot of the API being used here. So again, we can go down here, and I'm going to hover over and just find a name there. So if we start typing that name in, get filtered down, student images here. So we're going to filter down on this student. So it's the same thing that we had before, except now this time when I click off of it, it should clear it and listen for it. And this is where you're actually going to see what kind of happens to the dashboard when a lot of asynchronous commands get thrown at it, and why I'm using the screen to kind of cover that up, just for the user. So this student is actually in our 6th grade. You have multiple periods, so she's got a whole bunch of boxes here. But now, say someone comes in and I want to see why this student's down here. Now, kind of behind the scenes here, dashboard's going to start going crazy, hopefully. Okay, so they're starting to go. Sometimes the listener event takes a little bit. Actually, it's not working right now. But in any case, the dashboard will start going and this bottom one will disappear. Well, actually, there it goes. So it disappeared, and now we're not using that one anymore. The only kind of issue with that is you can't really mask what's going on behind the scenes. So I'm going to go ahead and clear all this. I'm actually going to hit refresh here real quick, so see if we can get that to work again. As we got some screaming kids out in the hallway. Maybe parents bring your daughter to work day. So we're going to go ahead and try this one more time to see if it works. It should work. It worked in our pre-taping, our pre-production meeting. So we're filtering down here again, just a different student. So now I'm going to go ahead and hope this works again. So we click a different mark, and there we go. So now that listener kicked in, knew we clicked the mark, starts clearing everything. And as you can see, a lot of things are happening on the dashboard, which is really, I kind of don't want the user to see because a lot of our principals and deans might freak out when something like that starts happening. But now it's back to how it was, and it's back to on who we picked, and they can start going from there. So the pros of this, I mean, look what we just accomplished. We kind of reenacted the action on the web page to get it to work. And the con is, well, obviously sometimes it being finicky and not working like you saw in this example, but there was a lot of tinkering with the code in order to get it to work in the correct order. So it's very powerful. The API let us do all the stuff that we wanted to do. This website would not exist without the Tableau API, so it helped us out tremendously. So I'm going to pass it back over to Aaron to kind of wrap up here.
Yeah, so this is how we've just our first foray into using the API. As Ryan alluded to, we have several other projects under the way right now that are using the API, and we're taking lessons that we learned from this first one on those. We're building a similar site for all of our teachers, so that's going to be hitting an even larger audience. And we're also in the process of redeveloping our student information system and are having talks with the development team of actually integrating visualizations within the student information system. From our side in our service center, the reporting and the data management are actually two quite different teams, and but to the end user, data entry and data retrieval are the same experience. So wanting to bring that so that they don't have to enter information in a student information system, then go to a reporting site to get the report. It will all be there as part of their seamless experience. So that's what we have planned over the next year or so with the Tableau API, and thanks for taking the time to listen to us, and hopefully it was helpful to help you get started on your own API journey or continue on from wherever you're at right now.
Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of whatever you're doing.